Councillors, welcome to our Public Voice Committee meeting. I'll open the meeting. It's just past 6 p.m. Notably, it's being held in our Newcastle City Council chambers here at 12 Stewart Avenue. As with all our meetings, the meeting is being live streamed and webcast. So welcome to anyone who is also watching online. Could I ask councillors to please stand for the Indigenous acknowledgement and the prayer? The City of Newcastle acknowledges that we are meeting on the traditional country of the Awabakala Worimi peoples. We recognise and respect their cultural heritage, beliefs and continuing relationship with the land, and that they are the proud survivors of more than 200 years of dispossession. Council reiterates its commitment to address disadvantages and attain justice for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples of this community. Almighty God, we humbly ask you to bless this meeting, direct and prosper our deliberations, for the advancement of your glory and the true welfare of the people of Newcastle. Colleagues, will you honour the memory of those who've served and died, that we might meet here in peace? Thank you. Councillors, we have a full complement, so there are no requests to attend by audio-visual means, and obviously no apologies of absence or leave. Do I have any declarations of pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest? There being none, I will go forth and welcome our first presenters and first speakers this evening. It's for 7 Guardo Road, New Lambton, DA 2022/00513, dual occupancy, including 1 into 2 lot subdivision and demolition of existing structures. So if this is your first time to Public Voice, welcome. We'll go with the objectors first. So that's Ms. Diana Sanders and Mr. Jeremy Norgard. Please join us. We've allowed about 10 minutes for your presentation, and then following you, we'll have the applicants do another 10 minutes, and then I'll open it up to questions for both yourselves and the applicants all at the same time based on your presentations from councillors. Welcome this evening. It's lovely to have people back in chambers, I must say, after the last couple of years, and please begin whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you to Councillor Wood and Councillor Clausen for calling this matter up this evening. And thank you to all the councillors here tonight. Slide 2, please. In the artist's impression, the applicants placed a spaceman on the deck of their proposed development. Well, they aren't far from the truth. This application is out of this world. In the design statement, they express that the development offers no impact and no detriment to the streetscape, no conflict with amenity, heritage and character, and that the building materials pay homage to the existing streetscape and character. Well, the residents of Guida Road wholeheartedly disagree. Next slide, please. It's quite easy to determine that the development is overbearing with 2 identical box-like dwellings. It clearly conflicts with the amenity, heritage and character of the street. It's unsympathetic, unsuitable and totally dishonours the existing streetscape. This development may pay homage to inner city localities, but certainly not quite established suburban areas. The development should be rejected on these points. Thank you. This slide shows the images of the properties in close proximity. As you can see, the established and existing streetscape and local character has been completely overlooked and ignored. The developers have proposed dominant dwellings squashed between 2 weatherboard cottages and placed on a street consisting of mainly single-storey weatherboard dwellings that are consistent and respectful to each other and the streetscape. The 2 properties either side are located at 4 o'clock and 5 o'clock on the slide. They'll be heavily impacted by the structure. Next slide, please. The developers submitted amended plans, however, their changes offered 0 solutions to 3 Guida Road. The eastern elevation remains a solid 7-metre plus high wall running the length of our property, creating privacy, visual and overshadowing concerns whilst being outside the building envelope. The conversion to the garage carport made no difference. This is going to lead to mould and rot, loss of light and environmental impacts, with similar issues for 9 Guida Road. You can see here recent developments in Guida Road have been respectful, considerate, sympathetic, and do not impact the existing streetscape. The proposed development will have negative impacts and should be rejected. Thank you.
Thanks, Diana. Look, the next couple of slides are around a few key themes. The first being development proposal non-compliance. We believe that the DA is inconsistent with the R2 zone objectives, and we've just mentioned streetscape, amenity, heritage and character. And it also should take into consideration that the development should not be overbearing. A 7.5 metre wall that's 15.1 metres in length on a setback of 900 millimetres on a boundary, I think that's far from not overbearing. The setback is part of the reduced setback is based on the ability to subdivide the block, which is in general contravention to the local environment plan around minimum lot size of 400 metres. We realise that there is an exception to that rule and it can be reduced, but one of the sub-clauses associated with that exception is that it shouldn't adversely impact residential amenity. Which, on my understandings around pleasantness, attractiveness and desirability of the development. We've also got concerns around the compliance of the setbacks. If you look at the side setback, the building envelope, and they've stated this in the DA, is outside the boundary limits. Furthermore, the rear setback, looking at the information note, I think it's 3.4 of the New South Wales guideline, for setbacks, it should be the average of the adjoining nearest 2 dwellings, which don't share a common boundary, but they are 16 and 25 metres setback from their rear fences. In the absence of that, I would assume that the rear setback would be 10 metres. And at the moment, the double story, the second story is setback 7.7 metres, and the first floor or the ground level is setback less than that. And if you look at the existing lot size, typically you'd have a side setback of 2.27 metres for a 7 metre high or 7.5 metre high building. So they're cutting the block in half. They're reducing the setbacks. We've got non-compliance around the building envelope, and I'm would like to be educated just on the mechanism the designer has used to calculate the compliance of the rear setback. And it also states that the setbacks are approximate in their nature. There's also a concern if the development has the potential to impact future development of adjoining properties if one of the existing landholders were to sell or develop themselves. Next slide, please. The next key theme is around privacy. So I've mentioned that the rear setback, I state there the first floor, meaning not the ground floor, so the upper story is not setback 7.7 metres from the northern boundary. As I understand, it should be 10. They've got a rear deck which has 4 steps leading up to the rear deck. They state that the rear fence is 1.8 metres high. That's fine, it is, with a natural sloping ground level declining from the rear of that property. And that deck is 1 metre above the ground level. So effectively the rear height fence is reduced to 1 metre or less. We've got privacy issues on the northern border, which is around the rear setbacks and the deck height. So all three adjoining properties. On the west side, there's no screen on the front balcony, which they state that there's a bedroom in between on the DA. That is the case for the eastern side, but not on the western side. And we've also got the fact that with a double-storey 7 metre high wall with windows on the top level, it does overlook both bedroom and bathroom areas on both the west and eastern, I guess, aspects of the development. So there are privacy concerns for all boundary properties on the three boundaries of the proposed development. The next slide looks at just illustrating the elevation from the north perspective. So that's a side view. I'm the property owner of 33 Railway Road. So if someone is standing on that back deck above the natural ground level, the red line vertical is the height of the existing fence, 1.8 metres. So you can see that there's definitely an adverse impact to privacy over that northern boundary with the rear setbacks and our fresco area. Last but not least, overshadowing. So there is a statement in the DA between the hours of 9 till 3, they get 2 hours of sunlight with a 7 metre wall, 900 setbacks, 15 metres long. I see that as dominating and overbearing. As Diana mentioned, there's increased likelihood of mould, rotting timber. We've had a few El Nino events already this year. So reduced sunlight, it will certainly impact those properties on the east and west boundaries. And if you look at those screen grabs of the shading areas there from the DA, the one on the bottom right, you can see that at 3 p.m. Over the period of June through the winter months, when you want that nice warm sun coming into your veranda, pergola or living room, it's totally shadowed. So you've also got heating costs that are going to increase over that winter period as well with reduced sunlight. I'll also just highlight that the City of Newcastle guidelines on that needs to know document, it does state clearly that it would not reasonably result in a greater amenity impact on surrounding properties than a compliant development. Next slide, please. So in summary, the residents and property owners adjacent to the proposed development are opposing this for the reasons we've just mentioned: privacy, amenity, character. There's questions over the minimum lot size, that it is overbearing with the proposed development, and that's a clause of the allowable subdivision. The setbacks, in particularly the rear setback, being less than 10 metres for the second story. The R2 zone objective around being overbearing, the building envelope on the eastern boundary, and the overshadowing impact through certainly the winter periods, both to the adjoining properties with that large 7 metre high wall, which is 15 metres long. So on that note, I'd like to thank Lord Mayor and councillors for the opportunity to present this afternoon or tonight.
Thank you very much. What I'll do now is I'll invite Ms. Emma Mason and Mr. Joel Coleman to present. And I think we have the PowerPoint presentation also uploaded to our iPads as well. So whenever you're ready, welcome. And when you're finished, then I will allow some questions.
Good evening, Lord Mayor and councillors. My name's Emma Mason. I'm the Principal Town Planner at DeWitt Consulting, and I'm joined by Joel Coleman, the architect from Shade. So this DA seeks consent for demolition of the existing dwelling, construction of a detached 2-storey dual occupancy and 1 into 2 lot subdivision at 7 Guida Road, New Lambton. Next slide, please. The site is a regular shaped lot located on the northern side of Guida Road. The site currently supports an older style single-storey weatherboard dwelling. There's also a metal garage and carport in the northeastern corner of the site. Landscaping is limited to turfed areas with no formal gardens or trees. The site exists within a well-established suburb of New Lambton with a mix of 1 and 2 storey, older style and contemporary low to medium density residential development located in the immediate area. Guida Park is located some 20 metres to the east, while New Lambton Pool and Sporting Fields, New Lambton Shops and Lambton Neighbourhood Shops are all located within a 500-metre radius of the site. And the John Hunter Hospital is also located approximately 1 kilometre southwest of the site. Next slide, please. The redevelopment of the site includes a 2-storey detached dual occupancy development, with each occupancy including a modest floor layout with living spaces on the ground floor and bedrooms on the first floor. There is an alfresco to the rear ground floor of each unit, which forms a private open space. And there are also balconies which overlook Guida Road. Each dwelling has been provided with a single attached garage and an open carport, which was a redesign element to assist with increasing the setbacks to the other properties and reducing the overall bulk and scale of the proposal. We wish to note that the minimum parking requirement of 1 space has been met. Also included in is new landscaping, which includes amenity trees in the front and rear yards, which will be a significant improvement to the existing informal landscaping at the site. A 1 into 2 lot Torrens title subdivision will also be undertaken as part of this DA, with each dwelling to be on its own title. The subdivision is actually compliant with the local environmental plan, clause 4.1a, which allows subdivision to be undertaken in conjunction with the development application, and it allows the subdivision lots to be created down to 200 square metres or more. So just a quick overview on the DA process. The DA was lodged on the 17th of May 2022 and went on public notification for 2 weeks, where a total of 5 submissions were received. Consequently, a request for information, or RFI, was issued by council relating to the 6 key matters shown on the slide. In response to the RFI, all items and concerns raised by council were addressed in a revised set of architectural plans. Regarding privacy, I'll move on from that point. Following the resubmission on the amended information, the application was again placed on public notification, and a total of 4 submissions were received through the second round. We further understand that the key concerns from objectors lies around the development's design and its appropriateness for the area, available solar access to adjoining properties, and compliance with the building envelope controls. So these key themes are discussed further in the next slides. Next slide, please. It should be noted that the majority of the submissions were pro forma submissions with similar concerns expressed by each objector. We believe that given the chance, the objectors' concerns would be eased with further explanation, which is the intent of our presentation today. We also wish to emphasise that the development has been modified with objectors' concerns in mind, and the current proposal, as far as we know, has the council assessing officer's support. In terms of the question of character, there are several examples of other dual occupancies within the immediate area, such as 22 and 24 Guida Road immediately opposite the site, as well as 19 and 21 Clarence Road directly behind that, which are shown highlighted in the middle image. Further to the north and east are numerous older multi-dwelling housing developments, some of which are shown in the far right image. There is also a trend of brick dwellings, not just weatherboard, in the area. The materiality, although in a different architectural style, is of similar materials to the local context. These materials have been chosen to further enhance and draw reference to the character of the locality, while allowing the development to improve and update the area. Contemporary character is discussed further in this presentation. Concerns on privacy, solar access, development compliance are discussed on the next slides, and character is revisited again on the last slide. The objectors have raised concern regarding privacy. All windows to the side boundaries have a window sill height above 1.5 metres, which is accepted as a privacy mitigation measure and compliant with the development control plan. The 2 windows on each unit facing north of the first floor have been provided with an awning device which limits overlooking to the east and west properties, which again is an accepted privacy mitigation measure. The setback from the proposed windows to the rear boundary is 7.7 metres, plus the 3 metre distance from the common boundary to the dwelling at number 33 Railway provides a total spatial separation of 10.7 metres, and that's at the rear of the dwellings. Under the development control plan, privacy screens are only required at the first floor level when the distance is less than 6 metres from a window to the boundary. Lastly, we would note that the concern was raised regarding front balconies and overlooking to the east and west. There is a solid wall to the west, and a full height privacy screen has been provided to the east, ensuring no overlooking is possible. In conclusion, the development has been designed to reduce overlooking of adjoining development and is fully compliant with the acceptable solutions under the development control plan. We understand that objectors raise concern regarding solar access to the adjoining properties and perceived impacts of the proposal. In this regard, we've worked with Council's assessing officer to help address these concerns, providing shadow diagrams for the existing and proposed outcomes, which have been accepted by Council's officer. The existing shadow diagrams demonstrate that both adjoining properties to the east and west are already overshadowed by the existing dwelling, fencing and shed at the subject site in the morning and afternoons. We note there are no impacts to any properties on the opposite side of Guida Road or to the north. New shadows onto the adjoining western property at 9 Guida Road are actually very minimal, with no new shadows cast to the rear yard and additional new shadows to their roof limited to the 9 a.m. period only, and only a small portion of the roof at that. And I should just point out that the shadow diagrams on the screen, the top half are relating to the existing shadowing and the bottom half are relating to the proposed development, and follow through from 9 a.m, 10 a.m, 11 a.m. through to 3 p.m, which is the last one on the bottom right-hand corner. At midday, the additional shadowing only affects a small part of number 3 Guida Road's front yard, which is the property to the east. In the afternoon, there are already shadows cast by the existing dwelling and fencing, with new shadows really only impacting the adjoining eastern property's roof from 2 p.m. in the afternoon onwards. It is relevant to note as well that the 2 adjoining properties to the east and west have entire rear yards, and private open spaces which are not shaded by this development at all. The orientation is really quite favourable for this. In conclusion, the actual new impacts from the proposal are very minor, and the development demonstrates full compliance with Council's development controls, which require that only 2 hours of solar access be provided. We note objections also appear to focus on the single non-compliance of the entire development being the uppermost part of the building wall on dwelling 1's east side, as shown in the image. Next slide. We again emphasise that this non-compliance is extremely minor and realistically has no more impacts than a compliant development. This is reinforced by the assessment of privacy and overshadowing, which has been deemed compliant and reasonable. The proposed development is consistent with every other clause and control set out in the Newcastle Local Environmental Plan and DCP. It is consistent with front setbacks of neighbouring buildings and the standard setback for the R2 zone. All other matters relating to private open space, solar access, building separation, landscape area, parking and the like are consistent with the relevant provisions. I'd also like to note that the setbacks referred to in the objector's presentation don't actually apply to this form of development. They are relevant to complying development, which is assessed under a different set of guidelines. So this development's been designed to comply with the LEP and DCP as required. Next slide, please. New Lambton is noted as a renewal corridor and a future urban renewal corridor under the Greater Newcastle Metropolitan Plan 2036 and a future urban renewal corridor under the local strategic planning statement. This suburb expects a significant amount of infill development to occur in the short to long term to provide housing opportunities for the growing population. The proposed dual occupancy is therefore entirely consistent with the desired future housing outcomes for this area. The intent of the works is to increase residential housing diversity within the area without intensifying the site significantly. A dual occupancy development on the site will ensure that there is housing diversity within the area, but the overall intent of the low to medium density zoning is maintained, with each dwelling to be located on its own title at the completion of the project. The scale, type and development of built form is compatible with the future direction for development in the locality, which is discussed next. Next slide, please. Upon analysis of the immediate context, it is clear that the surrounding locale is undergoing change with a significant amount of construction works either recently completed or currently being undertaken. It is apparent how the nature of this locality does not have a true defined character as it undergoes change in line with the directives of the renewal corridors and through implementation of the LEP and DCP. There are many examples of new developments in the area that are consistent with the desired future character of the area and are of a contemporary design, many of which include a much higher density than what is proposed with this application. All of the examples shown here are within a 400-metre radius of the subject site. Next slide, please. On summary, the proposed development is permitted with consent in the R2 low density residential zone. It's consistent with the objectives of the zone, as well as being highly consistent with the relevant clauses and controls set out in the LEP and DCP. The architectural design is of a high quality with careful consideration given to the desired future character of this locality. The proposal is reasonable and appropriate when considered under the relevant heads of consideration in section 4.15 of the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act and is worthy of favourable consideration by Council. We encourage councillors to show confidence in the strategic and statutory framework that this development has been designed in accordance with and in Council staff's robust assessment of this DA. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your presentation. What I'll do is I'll ask if Diana and Jeremy could join us, and we'll just maybe have Diana and Jeremy on one mic, and then maybe Emma and Joel on the other mic, if that's... And I'll also, while we're getting the seats organised, I'll just open it up to councillors if they have questions of our presenters this evening. Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you both for those presentations. Just had a question about the rear privacy screens in the first instance. Are they fixed? There's arrows on the diagram. I'm just trying to understand. Yeah, they're not very well depicted from the images that we have, and whether they're adjustable or they're internal or external. Just a bit more information.
The rear privacy screens, they're shrouds, so they're actual window hoods that have been designed around the entire window. So it blocks a bit of privacy looking sideways is the benefit there. And I think, as Emma was describing, we haven't essentially screened the front of those windows looking to the rear of the property because we're within that guideline of or outside the zone of influence for having to provide that, basically. So they're more or less designed in a way to stop the sideways looking to the neighbouring properties.
Just to reiterate that, I understand that you were concerned about the rear privacy impacts, and I wonder if you would be open to adjusting those as a result of the conversation this evening, just to address some of those residents' concerns about that direct looking, notwithstanding setback requirements, which I think are established, but just in terms of those concerns, there are obviously adjustable louvers and a range of privacy screens that are available there. I invite you to sort of reconsider some of the options for that. Thank you.
I was just going to say, look, I'd obviously have to consult with our clients as well, but we're open to anything that wants to be put forth formally and whatever's within the guidelines and that everyone can be happy with, for sure.
Thank you. Are there further questions from councillors? Councillor Church.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The objectors were concerned about the rear setbacks and there was some confusion. I just wanted to clarify for all parties. Are you now happy with that understanding of how the setbacks work, or do you require a bit more further explanation?
I would like some further explanation. They quoted a 10-metre distance, but that was between dwellings. It wasn't a setback. So the setback is still sitting there on the second floor at 7.7. So just how that complies and what document they're referring to. I noticed that they did mention it, but the information note around it, the setback guideline that I was looking at, stated 10 metres in the absence, or I'm assuming 10 metres in the absence of an average of the nearest two dwellings.
I'm happy if you would like to take that question. Yeah.
Yeah, that's all right. Yeah. So Emma was referring to the average 10-metre setback was from, in actual fact, another set of legislative documents, the CDC guidelines. So we've followed the Newcastle DCP, which is a 3-metre setback on the ground floor and a 6-metre setback on the first floor.
Just to help clarify, I can ask our Director of Environment and Planning to clarify those two documents, but complying development doesn't go through this process, so the controls are a lot higher in terms of being able to meet them, because they wouldn't go through this type of rigorous assessment process. So they're a higher control, whereas the LEP have these set controls, which is what this application has come under. If it helps, I can refer it to Ms. Bisson for further clarification for you.
Thank you. Thank you, Lord Mayor. You've done a great job yourself.
Thank you.
But yes, the complying development SEP has, I guess, additional controls, and the process for a complying development is that it doesn't necessarily need to be notified. It has a strict time frame of 10 days, and it's more of a streamlined process if those controls are met. Through this process, it's an individual merit-based assessment, and our development control plan and local environment plan are there as a guide for the application to be assessed on those merits. So they're not as stringent as the complying development.
So the complying development controls are normally a lot harder to meet because of the faster turnaround times, and they don't go through this rigorous process. But if I can paraphrase the concern, it's around the viewing from the back deck over into neighbours' property. Is that that's a concern? If I could paraphrase that back to the applicants, is there a way that that can be modified to meet the concerns, the privacy concerns in the backyards of the adjoining neighbours?
Yeah, thanks for that explanation. That was a good one. So, look, I think what you're asking, Nuatali, sorry, is the privacy is the main concern on the rear setback on those upper floors looking over the rear boundary. So we believe we're open to anything really. I would have to consult with my clients as well as to what they would want to do. But I think there may be just a bit of reading through the plans, and if there's anything I can say or anything that you want to ask me directly that might help me explain it to you a little bit better. I don't, as in its current form, we've proposed some solid structure around the windows to stop the sideways looking. There's a view, obviously you can look through your window to the rear boundary, and it's set back a certain distance that's deemed appropriate, which is actually quite a significant setback as well in terms of the scale of this development and what we could do. So I'm happy for you to ask me a question directly if there's anything else that I could say that would sort of appease any of your concerns there.
Normally the process for this meeting is that councillors would ask, but I appreciate the openness, and maybe after this meeting you could all just have a little catch up and go through some of the concerns. It's not, from my reading of both presentations, it's not just the second floor setback, it's the height of the bottom floor. So if you can address that, there's different ways I've seen it addressed. There's lowering the deck. There is also relatively mature plantings. There's a higher fence, rear fence options, but you can actually put conditions of consent in that can deal with the issue they had where the deck is high and then looks over the fence and into their yard. So it's both floors. That's how I interpreted the presentation.
Yeah, that makes more sense. So on the first floor, we don't have a deck, just to clarify that one. It's
Right.
just
It's on a slab?
It's on the first floor, sorry.
Right, okay.
They're just two bedrooms.
Right.
So there's no deck on the back of the property on the first floor looking over any other property.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
I did mean to say ground, but they moved us
yeah.
into a building
Yeah.
and used American terminology, which annoys me every day.
Sure. Yeah.
And they call this floor the first floor. So
Yeah. Okay, no, that's fine. And then I did notice in the objectors a slide that we had an image shown with a line looking over the fence and someone standing on the back deck. And I think we've got on our plans, and I believe it was on those ones too, we've highlighted the 1800 mil high fence, and it seemed like a lot higher what was drawn on that plan, just out of what I could visually see there. And we're only, I noted that the objectors had said it was up around the metre or just over a metre out of the ground, but we're only 600 mil out of the ground.
Okay.
500 to 600 mil. So from our experience, we've seen that's quite a low sort of rise. I mean, when you talk about a waffle pod slab system, you're generally on the ground, and then the floor of your house is 400 to 450 mil above natural ground line. So we've sort of said that because of the slope of the land, the way it worked, we're another 50, 100 mil above what that is, because it slopes away just a touch. So essentially, to summarise, it is a really predominantly flat site. We're really, really quite low, and I think it may have just been a scaling issue on the plans.
Okay, well that could be a resolution, or you could also look to the other soft plantings, different options, the height of the fence at the rear, just to allay those concerns. So if you don't all have to discuss after this public voice, but it might be helpful to go through and actually make sure those sight lines are understood, so everyone is very clear about what the privacy concerns at the rear of the dwellings are. What I'll do is I can see I've got some other questions from councillors, so I'll go to Councillor McCabe.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I just wanted to raise and discuss a little bit some of the concerns around character, because that's an issue that I am really interested in the city, and I feel like there are a lot of people who they see that in our planning instruments we talk about protecting the character, but the issue is that we don't have any real way of defining what that character is, and then having any real controls over ensuring it. And I just think that actually creates a lot of confusion and tension, and it's something that I'd really I'd like to see clarified, and I'd like to see worked out for each suburb. And you might not already know that there's been some work done for the Tyers Hill character study, and Katara also has started working on their own character statements, but they're not yet in up to the place where we can have they're not built into our planning instruments. But what was interesting for me being part of those discussions is that it with the communities I've been part of the Tyers Hill one, was that it wasn't just about an aesthetic choice, which I can see at the moment that people feel that they have the right to build whatever house that they would like to build there, but that we identified that in our community the design of the house really affected the way that the community interacted with each other, and we came up with this terminology of having a hard face and an open face. And the design that often seems to be chosen for modern buildings at the moment, having the carport close to the front setback, kind of creates a type of a house that doesn't have those the front porches and the front gardens and things like that that we find in our community is really, really important for interaction, and we're losing that when we're seeing these new designs put in. So it's not just the aesthetic choice of pitch roofs and of materials, but it's also does affect the way that the community interacts. And it's not just a Novocastrian thing. There is a New South Wales government local character and place guideline that I'm not sure exactly where that got to. I know that there's been lots of discussion about character in Melbourne, in other states, and I think it is an issue that our communities are struggling with everywhere. And I suppose to raise to you that maybe Lambton might like to be a suburb that next defines what the character is for your suburb, and that we can get it built into our planning statement, so that this kind of tension doesn't keep presenting itself. Thank you.
Thank you. I can see I have another question from Councillor Wood.
Thank you. Look, I support the comments that Councillor McCabe has made. I think that there's a lot of concern about the changes to our city, and that those changes are taking place without proper regard to what is already there. And I suppose in circumstances where we don't actually have character statements for older suburbs like New Lambton, it would be great if people who are wanting to build something on their property and do what your client has done, it would be great if they actually looked at their community and actually talked to their neighbours, talked to their community about what was going to work for everyone. This idea that we own a block of land and we can just go ahead and do whatever we like on that block of land, that's taking us to a place where communities are becoming divided. And that's an outcome that I don't think anybody wants. So getting back to the specifics of your particular matter, I suppose it concerns me that in your presentation, the photographs you provided of the character of the suburb didn't include any of those older houses. I've walked down Wider Road with my dog, and I know that there are some beautiful old timber houses from the early 1900s dotted through that street. And I think we have to acknowledge that there is a lot of older buildings that are actually, for many of us, aesthetically pleasing, but they do establish, I suppose, a certain kind of atmosphere in a suburb. And wouldn't it be great if we could have a suburb that actually melded together, that we didn't have these buildings that suddenly jumped out at you from the streetscape, that looked entirely different to the houses in the rest of the street. So I suppose I have two questions. One relates to the issue of character, and that is, look, I wonder why you didn't think about having a pitched roof. All of the houses in Wider Road and many of the houses in that part of New Lambton do have pitched roofs. And one of the photos that you provided of a recent development, the one where the old service station used to be near Lambton Park, I love that. I think that that actually achieves a great outcome for everyone because it's quite an innovative design and it takes its hat off to the kind of buildings that are already there by having those pointed roofs. And I just wonder why you didn't consider having a pitched roof for this development.
So for this one in particular, I acknowledge all your comments about the mix of heritage and traditional buildings and that history that comes in with new development and need and modern living and what you can and can't do on a site and things like that. I feel like, you know, there's no perfect outcome for everybody for a whole city, essentially speaking in very general terms. But I like to think that we do have a bit of experience in what we do, not to state the obvious, but just more for the simple fact that I'm not sitting here tonight saying that we haven't thought about anything that we've done on this site, really. Maybe it's a difference of opinion or what design styles or what you like, but to specifically more talk about what you were saying, melding in communities and how you see that into the future and preserve that history in that
and
too.
Bringing communities together because
Yeah.
people are able to agree about what their area should look like.
Yeah, I almost argue for this development itself that I acknowledge that it might be polarizing for some, just the harshness of not having a pitched roof or being more square in form, and just the form of the building is contemporary. The materials are quite common, traditional, depending on brick selections and things that we would like to manage as well, make sure that that has that blend in there. I think if you work through the scale of it all, you can have, we do a lot in Cooks Hill, Merriweather, all the heritage zones in there, Beaumont Street, everywhere. And we learned over the last decade and a half of working through here that there's a fundamental, you don't want to replicate heritage that takes away from the heritage of suburbs. So sure, this one's going the other extreme in terms of the form of it. But then, like you said yourself, you've got another one around the corner, which is a bit halfway between this one and that one. And to us, and where my design principles lie, and whether it's agreed with or not, that is the future of the mix of everything that's about to come to fruition in the next couple of decades of this city, because you're going to have an ultra-modern next door maybe sold, or in the street maybe renovated, and a more heritage, a building that already had a bit of tradition or heritage already there may be preserved and renovated in a way to complement that one too, with a whole bunch of other buildings along there as well. So you have buildings that mix, buildings that juxtapose, you have buildings that enhance what was there, and to us that is the mix that is coming. And maybe you haven't got a lot of two-story developments on this street in particular right now at the moment, but we feel that that is the future context of the area.
I suppose I understand what you're saying, but I guess this isn't what the community is saying to us.
Yeah.
That they want these sort of juxtapositions and that's how their suburb is going to look. The community is saying that they want something that's more sympathetic with what's already there. And it did strike me that I don't know that you actually answered my question with all respect.
Sorry. Yeah.
Why you didn't consider a pitched roof?
Why we didn't?
Yeah.
I think to answer it quite simply is that we're going for that juxtaposed sort of look in terms of the form of the building, not the material.
So it was quite a deliberate choice on your part to make it ultra modern and for it to be totally different to anything else in that street.
I wouldn't say totally in ruling out that that's on this side of the line and that side of the line. I think the materiality still connects, but the form of the building, I agree, is totally different. Yes. Mm.
Okay, so well, that does answer my question
Yeah,
about pitched
sure.
roofs.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't have considered, the design choices that were made in that other building close to Lambton Park. You wouldn't have considered those design choices, that kind of design choice.
We consider all types of designs. We design buildings like the one you're talking about. We design buildings where we have full state significance heritage involved or local heritage involved, where we really have to restore and replenish that building. And we have juxtaposed designs on the back of those that are disconnected but connected with modern forms of creating thresholds and spaces and landscaping and all those types of things as well. So this one, the existing building on the site didn't warrant any maintenance, basically.
Well,
so
that's right.
And we've taken the design approach to juxtapose in this sense. Yeah, for sure. And to us, just to summarise, sorry, was we have discussions with assessing officers in council. It may not seem like that to everybody, but the juxtaposition to us lets the heritage and traditional buildings stand out from what is new and what is old.
I think you might find a few different opinions on that one.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
My next question relates to the design. You've got two dwellings that are exactly the same. And the consequence of that is that the long wall on one of the dwellings is adjacent to number 3. And I just wonder is there any good reason why you can't reverse the design for that particular dwelling? So it's sort of like a mirror image. There are two mirror image dwellings rather than you having exactly the same dwelling on each side, because there are adverse consequences for one of the neighbours in doing that. So is there any reason to not flip the design that's adjacent to number 3 so that long wall isn't as long?
Yeah, there is. Like, we do consider those things, and it's not necessarily that you are to agree with me with all this sort of stuff, but we think the amenity of that building we're proposing is better suited to that layout and that orientation and that flip form the way we've got it, in terms of solar access to its living areas and private open spaces and the way it opens up to northern easterly aspects and things like that. At the time of designing these, we considered, and we still do, the encroachment of that eastern boundary wall to be minor in nature, considering the overall project and the amenity to these buildings as well. So we acknowledge that you're talking about solar access to the neighbouring properties, and we've considered that, and they do in fact meet the requirements of the solar access.
I understand that, but I just want, you have given me an explanation, which is that actually if you look at the development on its own in isolation, you went with a design that you thought was better for your development without thinking about the impact on the neighbours, which I believe would be reduced if the design was flipped. But I take your point.
Okay, yeah. No, that's fine.
I don't have anything further to ask.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I have another question from Councillor Adamczyk. Thank you, Councillor Wood.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. Thanks for your presentations to both of you. I have a few questions. So concerns not solely with the aesthetics. I think that they've been well covered. And I do reiterate those concerns that it's not necessarily sympathetic to the area, which can be achieved with a modern design and form. But I guess there's a couple of things to me that stood out as well in the choices around the form and the materiality of the building that probably builds a little on Councillor Wood's question about the pitched roof and just the thermal soundness of the building. So obviously a pitched roof creates a better insulating barrier for inhabitants. The opposers mentioned a couple of the externalities that you will be pushing on to, whether that's the neighbours or the future inhabitants there. Mould, rotting timber. We've got the heating and cooling costs that are going to be internalised by the residents because there's no eaves on any of the windows. So that's another concern. The lack of the pitched roof is a concern. So I was wondering if you could just talk to those choices in the design as to, you know, how you imagine someone would comfortably use this space as their home.
Yep. No, thank you. Good question. So really with modern design, it's I wouldn't think that we've really reinvented the wheel with this. Like it's the materials and modern basics requirements and the actual building itself. You're talking about how we will inhabit these buildings and be comfortable themselves as well as the neighbouring properties. There's actually quite a lot of room to insulate these houses. No eaves doesn't mean that you automatically have a building that doesn't perform energy-wise or doesn't hold heat or retain. You have a whole bunch of offsets that you run through with these sorts of proposals. You have windows and doors that are all thermally broken, and you can have double glazing and all those types of construction methods that really help you create an energy efficient home. And it's actually quite standard these days as well. So it's tried and tested. So I take on board what you're saying, but these homes really will be quite comfortable homes to live in themselves, talking about our ones. And then in regards to the neighbouring property and both the neighbouring properties and the overshadowing and rots and moulds and things like that as well, I think that is a concern at this stage for the objectors and the neighbours, and it just may be the shock of seeing something two-story next door, but it's not actually going to create those issues that you're talking about.
Thanks. So you mentioned there's opportunities for double glazing and insulation.
Yeah.
Is that a commitment that you will be putting those into this building?
I haven't got the basics in front of me, but we just follow. So are you aware of the basics requirements for each building that
Yes,
we have
I think
to design?
we're aware
Yep.
of basics. Thank you.
Yep. So we follow that guideline, and that has a minimum rating, obviously, of 6 stars or whatever it is now, and this building has design that is committed to using that rating, basically.
Yeah, I think that what is important here as well in basics is that there is that distinction between controls that are within the built envelope and then there's mechanical controls. And so I would worry about the reliance on mechanical controls like air conditioning and those kinds of systems that put that cost onto the inhabitants. So if you are considering doing thermally sound built fabric controls, I would urge you to consider those until they're actually regulated as such.
Yeah.
My other question is about the size of the garage, which seems incredibly narrow to fit a car. So the size of the garage, according to the plans where I was able to find it, is 2,700. A car is between 1645 to 2745, and then you need 600 either side to open car doors.
So the garage is 3 metres and 70 mil wide, and then you need 300 mil either side of your 2 point. So your Australian standard for solid walls either side of your car is a 3 metre clearance. So you have a 2.7 for your car and then 300 mil either side. So we are compliant with that Australian standard.
Yeah, I understand if that's compliance. I think that many of us in this room would struggle to get in and out of a car where we've got 30 centimetres to open the door. So, you know, I consider rethinking that part of the development and the pressure that you're placing on people there to either have a very small car or to find creative ways of manoeuvring around.
I understand your concerns, but they are actually quite comfortable as well. And I'm not just trying to say that. It is a good dimension that is generated in the Australian standard for that reason.
What I'll do is I'll just see if there's any other questions from councillors. It is important to note that There are some controls we have domain over, and there are basics controls that I think we would all agree. There has been much discussion both at a state and national level about the improvements of those standards for all of the reasons that particularly Councillor McCabe, Wood and Adam Check have raised. But it is, when we are assessing DAs, we cannot necessarily bring what optimally we would like into basics into that assessment process, just to not give false hope to either party. It is a very baseline minimum standard, and I'm quite happy to say on the record that I would like to see basics improved. I think for a myriad of reasons, and obviously local character is an issue for all local communities. So this is a merit-based assessment against the EP&A Act. So the fact that both the objectors and the applicants are here and willing to potentially have a discussion, I think is about some of the touch points, I think is a good thing, and I'd really encourage that if that's possible. You always get a better outcome for both parties if the communication is more free-flowing, particularly if you have applicants and objectors willing to work together on an optimal solution for everybody. So I'd encourage you to do that. But before I thank everybody, I'll just make sure everyone's had the opportunity to ask questions. Oh, Councillor Wood, you had another one? Go ahead.
Look, just a quick question. What colour is the roof?
What colour?
Yeah.
Just a light colour. We haven't selected one yet.
Okay.
A light colour.
It would be light, not dark.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
All right. I'll just check if there's any further questions. If there's no further questions, I'd just like to thank the four of you for coming in this evening. I think you've really helped us understand the application and also the issues the neighbours have with the application. It always probably provides for a better outcome for all parties to go through this process if there are some of those touch points. And I know it takes a lot of time out of your schedules, but we do really appreciate it, you making the time. So thank you. Councillors, that will officially close our briefing committee at 7:20 p.m. In doing so, I will go straight into our Development Application Committee meeting, which I will open at 7:21 p.m. And I have no request to attend via audio-visual means, and I have no requests for a leave of absence. There are 3 items on the agenda. Do I have any declarations of pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest? If there are no declarations, I will go straight to the Development Application Committee minutes from the 18th of October. Do I have a mover of those? Councillor Mackenzie, seconded Councillor Barry. All those in favour, please raise your hand. All those against, I declare that carried unanimously. The first item, which is item 19, which is 292 Maitland Road, Mayfield, DA 2021/01338, shop top housing, including demolition of existing structures. Do I have a mover of the recommendation? Councillor Clausen, do I have a seconder? Councillor Winnie Bartz, would you like to speak to the motion, councillor?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Happy to speak in support of this recommendation. This is a really significant development for Mayfield. It's as the report outlines, a $27 million project that will generate 58 new residential apartments in the heart of Mayfield. It delivers on the long-held Mayfield renewal strategy and the redevelopment of land through key corridors in the city. This particular site is well located, as we can see, and it's discussed in some detail in the report, next to Webb Park, which itself is a heritage listed park that's recently received some upgrades from council. The development received a single submission during the public exhibition periods. It's gone to the Urban Design Consultative Group on a number of occasions, and the UDRP have been very complimentary in terms of their most recent review, identifying that the panel's recommendations have been well addressed and it is a well-designed development. There are some exceedances, and it is worth noting that there's exceedances in terms of the height and the FSR. The height is due to a lift overrun, and the report identifies that the lift overrun doesn't cause any adverse shadowing on any neighbouring development or on the park. On that basis, I think that it is an acceptable outcome for the park and is an improvement compared to the existing form of the development. I should have mentioned that the zoning, this is in the mixed use zone of the Mayfields CBD. It's positive that there's this increase in terms of residential development, but that's been matched also with the ground plane activations that are continuing. So I'm quite supportive of the development and the quality of the architectural design that's been proposed, and happy to support the recommendation for its approval tonight.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other speakers? Councillor McCabe.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. My first reaction to this was that I really loved the internal courtyard, and particularly that was set behind the building that fronted Maitland Road, because it would mean creating a quiet internal communal space. And I thought that was excellent design. But I was disappointed and concerned to read in the URDP comments that the design actually didn't meet the requirements for the open communal space, only by 4%, which usually I would have found that, as long as all attempts had been made to find the best outcomes for the site. But it was the fact that they used the comment that this was acceptable because the people in these dwellings would be able to use Webb Park as their communal open space, which really just set all of my alarm bells off. I really have a strong reaction about private design not meeting their requirements, overachieving in their floor space ratio and underachieving in their communal space, and then saying that that's acceptable because there's a public park there that the private dwellers will be able to utilise. I just would have really preferred it if the URDP didn't include that in their commentary at all. However, if that hadn't been noted, then I wouldn't have had these kind of concerns, and I will still be approving this development, but I would prefer it if they didn't refer to public land in the future in that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCabe. Is there any other commentary, speakers for or against the motion? If there are none, I'm speaking in favour of the motion before us. I won't reiterate all of Councillor Clausen's points. However, I think it is actually quite a vast improvement to what we have on that site, and does provide a significant amount of housing. I too, like Councillor McCabe, actually did like the principles of the design that has been used there. And we have had a long discussion this evening around design, and I think that we do have, in principle, very good design outcomes with that internal courtyard space and the presentation to the road in regards particularly to the improvement to what's actually there at the moment on that site. But I acknowledge your concerns and that commentary. Unfortunately, that does get used quite often. But given the significance of the investment into Mayfield, into the renewal corridor, which is why we're seeing it, because it's over 15 million, and I'm just looking for the amount here, it's almost $27 million investment. I think there is obviously going to be a contribution to public amenity, and that is something through the process. I know we have all of our planning documents already laid out, but making sure there is a nexus to upgrade public amenity nearby, I think would be a priority for this site, given those concerns you've raised. Are there any other speakers? Would you like a right of reply, Councillor? I'll put the motion as moved and seconded. All those in favour, please stand. Councillor Church, Councillor McCabe, Councillor Mackenzie, Councillor Winnie Bartz, Councillor Wood, Councillor Duncan, Councillor Richardson, Councillor Clausen, Councillor Adamczyk, Councillor Barry, Councillor Walk, Councillor Paul, Councillor Nelms. As there are no votes against, I declare that motion carried unanimously. Councillors, the next item is 53 Rogers Street, Carrington, DA 2022/00587, dwelling house alterations and additions, including demolition. Do I have a mover of the motion? Councillor Adamczyk, thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Mackenzie, thank you. Would you like to speak to the motion, Councillor?
Thanks, Lord Mayor. I would like to move this. I think that this is well supportable. The request for a variation to FSR is well founded. It's a modest single-storey scale that's not going to significantly overshadow neighbouring properties, obstruct views, or result in negative privacy or bulk and scale impacts, as we can read in the report. But I think the most impressive part of this DA is that it achieves this extension almost entirely within the existing footprint, the streetscape, and it maintains the vistas and pedestrian amenity of the surrounds and the character of the area. It maintains the facade and is sympathetic, obviously, to the surrounding streetscape. So it delivers on the need as well, I note in the officer's report, to respond to the fact that it exists on a floodplain through using flood-resistant materials and finishes. As part of the work, the existing building is going to be upgraded as well to comply with fire performance. So I think that this is commendable. The proposed development with the recommended conditions is consistent with the requirements of the LEP, the NDCP, as well as the SEP. So I support this proposal. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Would you like to speak as seconder, Councillor Mackenzie?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I need to reiterate the comments of Councillor Adamczyk, and just to make reference to the fact that the site is 151 square metres in total. It's hard to imagine any kind of building that wouldn't have a floor space exceedance on a site that small, and especially given the narrow width, all of the design objectives that have been achieved is quite commendable, and happy to support. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Both excellent points made. Are there any other speakers? If there are no other speakers, would you like a right of reply, Councillor? I'll put the motion as moved and seconded. All those in favour, please stand. Councillor Church, Councillor McCabe, Councillor Mackenzie, Councillor Winnie Barts, Councillor Wood, Councillor Duncan, Councillor Richardson, Councillor Clausen, Councillor Adamczyk, Councillor Barry, Councillor Ward, Councillor Paul, Councillor Nelms. As there are no votes against, I declare that motion carried. The final item for Development Application Committee is 9 William Street, Mayfield, DA 2022/00532, dual occupancy, including demolition of existing structures. Do I have a mover of the recommendation? Councillor Clausen, do I have a seconder? Councillor Mackenzie, thank you. Would you like to speak to the motion, Councillor?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm happy to speak in support of this item. I note that there has been considerable discussions between council and the applicant. It was publicly exhibited on 2 occasions. On both occasions, there were no submissions received. The development is broadly compliant with the controls, although there's a significant exceedance with respect to FSR. The report is quite comprehensive, and I'm happy to support the officer's recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other speakers? If there are no other speakers, would you like a right of reply, Councillor? I'll put the motion as moved and seconded. All those in favour, please stand. Councillor Church, Councillor McCabe, Councillor Mackenzie, Councillor Winnie Barts, Councillor Wood, Councillor Duncan, Councillor Richardson, Councillor Clausen, Councillor Adamczyk, Councillor Barry, Councillor Walt, Councillor Paul, Councillor Nelms. As there are no votes against, I declare that motion carried. Our councillors, that actually concludes our Development Application Committee meeting for this evening. I'll close the meeting at 7:31 p.m. and I will just note that we do have a number of workshops that will follow immediately on.